if these teams perform the first 5 weeks of the season the way they're anticipated, Ohio State's going to be like a 3-touchdown favorite in this game. They played a
3-touchdown favorite. And Iowa does have a bye prior to the Ohio State game. Now, if you remember last year, having a bye before the Wisconsin game did 0 for Iowa. Iowa goes into Madison and gets pummeled. So doesn't necessarily mean anything, but Iowa does have an extra week with the remember the schedule revisions were very, very helpful for Iowa. So if I recall the previous schedule, Mark, Iowa had Michigan and Ohio State back to back. So now they get Michigan and they get a buffer. They get at Illinois, which could very well be a trap game, but at least you get that bye week after Illinois. You get an extra prep week for the Buckeyes, and then you have a Northwestern before going on the road to Purdue. The schedule is made up a bit better for Iowa, and it sounds like maybe a bit dangerous for Ohio State.
If you buy into these preseason position rankings, and I'm looking at Athlon's and I looked at Phil Steele's, Ohio State is pretty much just everything we've talked about, a juggernaut on offense. According to Phil Steele, best quarterback room, second best running back room, second best wide receiver room, third best offensive line room. And we know that the Iowa defense is going to be prepared and tough and arguably the best in the conference. Maybe the matchup to look at is the non-elite matchup of the Ohio State defense against the Iowa offense. And
I when you're looking at this, and I'd like to get Pat's opinion on this as well, when you're just matching up units, are you going to put your faith in an Ohio State defense that's uber talented and just hasn't proven itself? Or are you going to put your faith in an Iowa offense that's, I don't want to say, they're not marginally talented, but they're maybe average at the most from a talent perspective, that hasn't really been good, minus the 2017 Ohio State game, the 2019 USC game. To me, I'm banking on skill in that in that situation. So I hope I'm wrong. Now, can Iowa hold with? That's, I guess, a good question. That's a fun question to address, Pat. Can Iowa hold Ohio State under 30? Can they hold them under 20?
Yeah, I think that's going to be the question for every opponent this year is, first of all, is Ohio State's defense drastically improved? And Mark and I have talked on the show I do with him about just like how much better does this Ohio State defense have to be in order to be, the national championship caliber team that they want to be. And, it really probably only needs to be, I think they were 59th ranked in the country last year, probably in the 30s, somewhere in there around the top 30. So, if the Buckeyes are that much better and this offense is what people think it's going to be, I think it's going to be tough for any team. And I would throw in the elite teams. Does Alabama have the numbers to stop this offense enough if this defense can also get stops? We saw in the national championship game a couple of years ago, Ohio State just couldn't get Alabama off the field. I mean, they were able to put up points, put up some yards. So I think Big Ten teams have to hope that this defense is still either not figured out or a work in progress throughout the season as Jim Knowles tries to really implement what is a more complex look than what the Buckeyes have had in the past. And so, I think if teams can score with Ohio State, and you saw teams be able to do it last year. I mean, look at what Michigan did. Even, Oregon's not a Big Ten team, but they came into the horseshoe and, just ran it at Ohio State. I do think the scheme will be better. It's just a matter of, you still have to make the right plays and things like that. And, how long does that take to install for kids that weren't being taught this way for the last 2 seasons? So I think that's the biggest thing that other Big Ten teams are going to have to hope, because I just don't see this offense regressing much unless these guys just didn't put in the work. But I've been over at the facility for some recruiting camps, and you see these guys out here throwing passes. CJ Stroud, the backup quarterbacks as well, just these receivers a lot. And, I don't know where that slows down, and the running game, Travion Henderson is going to be a second-year player. He was obviously good last year, I think Big Ten Freshman of the Year. So, you assume he takes the next step as well, right? And that adds something a little bit more. Now, Ryan Day would have to use the running game. He's had a tendency to go pass heavy. He's a former quarterback, but when you have a talent like that, I think you try and give him the ball a little bit. So, I think if the defense isn't up to snuff, then, or at least not where they expect it to be, then Big Ten teams have a way to at least stay in games against Ohio State.
This offense hit its stride. Talking Ohio State, the offense hit its stride about 3/4 of the way through the season. And going into that Michigan game, they had just come off 2 games against really good teams, Purdue and Michigan State. Now, Michigan State had all sorts of issues in the secondary, but still, I thought that those numbers were inflated and I could go through it. But so I don't think Michigan State was as bad defensively in the secondary as what was advertised. But where Ohio State was, to think, I was going to bring up the point spread against Iowa. If these teams perform the first 5 weeks of the season the way they're anticipated, Ohio State's going to be like a 3-touchdown favorite in this game. They played a
3-touchdown favorite.
Listen, Corey, let me continue. They played Michigan State last year when Michigan State was 9-1.
Mm-hmm.
They were like a 25-point favorite in that game against Michigan State, and the score at halftime was 49-0.
As Steve Dace reminded you, though, Mark, I know you were trying to inflate that Michigan State defense. The point spread's not going to be 21 when you have a Phil Parker defense going up against Ohio State. It's not. You're comparing Michigan State's defense. We're talking about numbers here, Mark.
But Michigan State had a pulse on offense, too. Let's understand, Michigan State was better than Iowa was last year. They were a better team.
Yeah, I have a hard time seeing. We can argue this point, but I have a hard time seeing it being a 21-point spread given Iowa's defense. I don't think Vegas is going to be counting on Ohio State.
If Ohio State and Iowa play to their expected capabilities leading into that game, that's the only point I'm making. Like, Ohio State's a 2-touchdown favorite against Notre Dame, and they're going to be ranked like 8th in the country to start the season.
Yeah, there is certainly an inflation of Ohio State. Mark and I have talked about it before. I think we talked about it before that Michigan State game, Mark, that, there tends to be just the way betting works. It's not always the exact spread. You want people to bet certain ways and whatnot, right? So, I don't know what it'll be for Iowa, but to Mark's point, there does seem to be a inflated thought of Ohio State, even when they're not they're at their best. I just, I think they know people will bet against the Buckeyes because they dislike the Buckeyes, and then Buckeye fans will come back and bet the other way.
That's not a good idea, Mark. Listen, for an Ohio State fan, I'd be really nervous if there's a 21-point spread if going into the Iowa game. Like, we talk about motivation. Who's motivated then? If you're Iowa, who's motivated then when you're going on the road to a team you beat 4 years ago by 33? I don't care if it's. I get it.
I understand that. I'm just making the point.
Yeah, I hope it is.
Compare Michigan State last year and Purdue to Iowa. We would both agree, I think, that both of those teams were, if we had to choose, were better than Iowa.
Say that again.
Purdue and Michigan State. I believe Michigan State was better than Iowa.
Well,
was a better team than Iowa last year.
What was their final regular season record?
10-2,
which was Iowa's. We're splitting hairs now. You're going to tell me that they
played in the Eastern Division.
Okay, well, you just brought up Purdue. Is that because of the head-to-head? Purdue went 7-5 last year, Mark?
They went 9-4.
So 9-4. So they match up with Iowa poorly, but I think it's hard to just make that determination that Purdue and Michigan State were both better when Iowa finished 10-2. I will take Michigan
State and Purdue's 21 teams over Iowa. But I'm not saying it's not arguable. I'm just saying, and Ohio State just annihilated both of them. Those point spreads were like 24, 25 points against teams that played as well as they did.
So if I recall, I'm trying to think back. The thing about Iowa, as you know, Mark, and usually it's the other way around. Usually it's an Ohio State or a Michigan coming to Iowa City, or a Penn State coming to Iowa City. But like, the numbers seem, I know this goes against everything we stand for as analysts and experts, but like, it seems like numbers don't really matter when you're playing Iowa, especially in Kinnick. But when you're talking about these widely hyped matchups, it's like, I bring up the Michigan-Iowa game in 2016. That was you can call it an anomaly, but it happened. 2017, the Iowa-Penn State game. Again, did anybody expect Iowa to be competitive in that game? It was like 12. I think it was 12-7 at halftime. You have these just
Absolutely.
I would
No,
plays you differently.
I'm not predicting a score. I am
Yeah.
predicting what what their outlook on this game is going to be.
I hope you're right. I think it would serve Iowa well. The bigger the margin, the better. Because
it might, but I'm also making the point that Ohio State's gone out against point spreads like that, and it didn't factor into them providing a letdown kind of effort.
As long as Iowa doesn't approach this game the way they approach every Purdue game, then I have a hard time seeing Ohio State running away with the game, like by 21 plus. I have a real hard time because, like, other than Purdue, Phil Parker doesn't really lose to anybody. The Michigan game last year, again, I put that game primarily on the offense when you're holding a team down for 2.5 quarters and eventually you just break because you're on the field the entire game. You know, the Wisconsin game's kind of the same way. So I'm just saying, besides Purdue, like you look at last year, Mark, Iowa didn't really lose defensively to anyone. So as great as Ohio State's offense is, and I believe they will be, I'm just saying that's yet to be seen. Can they emulate what Purdue does? I don't know the answer to that because I have a lot of faith in Phil Parker, despite my criticisms of him being stubborn last year against Purdue.
Yeah, this is the last comment I'll make, and Pat can have his parting shot, and we've taken up way too much of your time, Pat. We appreciate you stopping by. So I have a great respect. You know this, Corey. I have great respect for both Phil Parker and the Iowa defense. Absolutely. But if they're going out there and Ohio State's defense is just serviceable, it's a top 30 to 40 defense in the country. It is going to stifle, to a certain extent, the 100th ranked offense in the country, or what we expect to be. So that Iowa defense could play great for 2 quarters, for an entire half, and 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. And that Ohio State defense is a completely different animal than anything Iowa faced last year. For as good as Purdue's passing offense is, they can't run the ball. Ohio State's got maybe the best running back in the nation. It's just...
So I agree. It's
a long game to have your defense run out there time after time after time.
I agree.
Defending short fields.
Now, Iowa, that's kind of what happened in the Michigan game. Again, we brought that up in the Big Ten championship game. Iowa just holds on, and you just can't produce anything offensively. But I do think Iowa, as bad as the offense is, I've told you this before, I don't know how much Iowa's going to take a jump. They have to take a jump with Brian this year. So I do believe, even if you can get this to being a top 100 offense, Ohio State's got to prove it. Like, they've got skill. I'd bank on the skill, but they still got to prove it on the field. Do I think Iowa could, throw I'm not going to rely on another polecat play out of a field goal formation, but I'm just saying, like, though I think they can create points, and it may not be as many points as we're thinking. That's all I'm saying. I think it's going to be difficult to cover that number. If they cover the 21-point number, yeah, then that probably tells me a heck of a lot more about Iowa's offense than Iowa's defense, because I don't see Iowa giving up 40 to 50 points at Ohio State. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see Phil Parker, even with an inept offense, doing that.